When I think back on the beginning of our marriage, I can't help but smile. It was a time of carefree laughter, spontaneous adventures, and endless love. We were inseparable, my husband Alex and I. Our shared interests, our love for travel, and the way we balanced each other out made me believe that our bond was unbreakable. 10 years together. 10 years of building a life, a family, and a world that was uniquely ours. But here I am now, looking back at a time that feels almost like a lifetime ago, questioning everything I once believed was real. We had always been avid travelers. The idea of exploring new places, experiencing different cultures, and escaping the monotony of daily life was something we both cherished. So when our 10th wedding anniversary came around, we both agreed that a getaway to a luxury resort was the perfect way to celebrate the milestone. We'd been through the ups and downs that come with any long-term relationship, but this was our chance to reconnect. We promised each other that this would be a fresh start, a chance to rekindle the spark that had dimmed over the years. The resort we chose was everything I had imagined, and more. Nestled on a secluded beach with crystal-clear waters stretching out as far as the eye could see, it was a paradise. The kind of place you only see in movies or in the pages of a glossy magazine. The warm sun, the gentle sound of the waves crashing against the shore, and the smell of salt in the air. The setting felt like a dream. I could already feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders as we arrived. We had been so busy with work and raising our children that this was exactly what we needed. Time alone. Time for just the two of us. Our arrival at the resort felt magical. The staff greeted us with warm smiles and cold drinks, welcoming us to the paradise we had longed for. The resort staff was incredibly friendly, and they were clearly used to catering to high-profile guests. We were shown to our villa, a stunning private retreat with an infinity pool overlooking the ocean. The luxury of it all made me feel like we were in another world, a world where nothing could go wrong. I looked at Alex, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a rush of excitement. This trip could be the turning point, I thought. The perfect time to reconnect, to remind ourselves of what we had. But something was off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel it. Alex, my ever-doting husband, was distant. Not in a glaring way, but enough to make me notice. He was checking his phone more than usual, tapping away at the screen as we walked along the beach, even during our romantic dinners. He seemed distracted, his attention often drifting elsewhere. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself that he was just preoccupied with work, or perhaps the stress of getting everything arranged for the trip. After all, he was always a little tense when we first arrived at a new destination. But as the days passed, that feeling of distance only grew. I brushed it off, hoping the vacation would bring him back to me. But as the days wore on, I couldn't ignore the subtle changes in him. I'd catch him staring out at the horizon, lost in thought, or slipping away to make phone calls while I sat by the pool, alone. He seemed to prefer spending time with the resort staff, especially a woman named Kayla. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was just being friendly, I told myself. But as I observed more closely, I couldn't help but notice the way they interacted. It wasn't just friendly. There was something else there. Something electric. I told myself I was imagining it. Kayla was just doing her job after all. She was one of the resort's event coordinators, always around to help with activities or make suggestions about local excursions. She was friendly, easygoing, and always had a smile on her face. But there was something about the way she and Alex talked, something that made me uncomfortable. Their interactions became more frequent. While I was left to relax by the pool, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, I would see them talking, laughing at something, sharing inside jokes, whispering as if there was some unspoken connection between them. It felt wrong, yet I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I kept telling myself it was nothing. I was just being insecure, right? It was just the unfamiliar environment, I reasoned, causing my mind to play tricks on me. But deep down, I knew there was something more. The first real sign that something wasn't right came one evening when Alex disappeared for hours after dinner. I had just settled into a chair on the balcony, enjoying the cool breeze as the sun dipped below the horizon. I assumed he was off with Kayla, arranging some new activity for us the next day, so I didn't think much of it. But as the night stretched on and I sat there, waiting for him to return, I began to feel a growing unease. When he finally came back, there was a strange energy about him. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He seemed almost nervous, like he was hiding something. It was the first time in a long while that I felt this disconnect between us, and it bothered me more than I cared to admit. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the stress of the trip and that things would return to normal soon. But the next day, when I saw Alex and Kayla talking by the beach, alone again, I couldn't ignore it any longer. There was a chemistry between them, something undeniable that I could see in the way they looked at each other. I felt sick to my stomach. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like I was watching a slow-motion train wreck, helpless to stop it. As the days passed, I found myself retreating more and more into myself. I tried to enjoy the beautiful surroundings, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that hung in the air between me and Alex. I wanted to talk to him, to ask what was going on, but I didn't know how. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining things? But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something was changing, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it was. At one point, I decided to confront him. I tried to catch him in a moment of honesty, to see if he would open up to me. But when I asked about the frequent phone calls, the late nights, the strange looks between him and Kayla, he brushed it off with a laugh. "It's nothing, sweetheart," he said, his tone casual, dismissive even. "You're just being paranoid. You know how it is with work." I wanted to believe him. I did. But as the days wore on, the pieces of the puzzle didn't seem to fit together anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that my marriage, the one I thought was solid, was slipping through my fingers. I had no idea how true that feeling was about to become. I could feel the tension in the air the moment we arrived at the resort. At first, I thought I was just overthinking things. Maybe it was the stress of the year. Maybe it was just the anticipation of this trip that was making me so keyed up. I wanted this to be perfect. I wanted to feel like we were that couple again. The one that could talk for hours, laugh for hours, and fall asleep in each other's arms, as if nothing else in the world mattered. But as soon as we checked into our villa, I felt something shift. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Alex wasn't the same. He wasn't as present, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had told myself over and over that this trip would be different. We would reconnect. But from the very first evening, he was distant. It wasn't just that he was quieter than usual, though that was part of it. It was more the way he kept glancing at his phone, tapping at it quickly whenever it buzzed, like he was trying to hide something. I tried to push the thought from my mind. Maybe he was just busy with work. Maybe it was nothing. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I wanted to shake it off, to trust him as I had always done. But that deep sense of discomfort only grew stronger the longer we stayed. And then there was Kayla. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, the resort was a large place, and I wasn't the type to get jealous easily. Kayla was just a resort employee, nothing more than that. She was polite, friendly, and good at her job. But there was something in the way she looked at Alex, something in the way he responded to her, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I tried to ignore it at first. I really did. Maybe I was just imagining things. But every time we crossed paths with Kayla, whether it was in the lobby, by the pool, or in the restaurant, it felt like there was a strange connection between them. She would laugh at his jokes a little too eagerly, stand a little too close, and he would always give her a smile that felt a little too familiar. I brushed it off. Maybe I was being paranoid, maybe it was nothing, but then it started to happen more often. On our second day there, we had a couple's massage scheduled. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. Finally, some time to relax, to unwind. But when we arrived at the spa, Alex suddenly got a call, his face tightening as he listened to whoever was on the other end. He told me he had to handle a few things, and that I should go ahead with the massage without him. He didn't even walk me to the door. I went in alone, but the entire time I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just that Alex had pulled away. It was that he seemed so eager to be elsewhere, like there was something, or someone, that was holding his attention. When I finished the massage and went to find him, I found him in the lounge, talking to Kayla. I didn't hear their conversation, but the way they were standing, so close to each other, leaning in just a little too much, made my heart drop. Alex caught sight of me and gave a nervous smile, like he had been caught in the act, but he quickly brushed it off. "Just talking about some logistics for the resort," he said, his voice too casual. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. Something was off. The next few days passed in a blur of activities that Alex would often ditch me for, leaving me alone. I tried to keep myself busy, enjoying the resort on my own, but the loneliness I felt grew heavier with each passing hour. We were supposed to be rekindling our bond, celebrating our 10 years together. But all I could feel was the distance between us, the emotional chasm that was widening with every interaction. It wasn't just the time he spent with Kayla, it was the way he acted. He was distracted, distant, and the more I tried to pull him back, the further he seemed to retreat. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I began noticing little things, like the way Alex would laugh with Kayla, how his eyes would linger on her a little too long, how he would smile at her in a way that made my stomach twist. It wasn't a smile of friendship, it was something else, something I wasn't sure I could define. It was an intimacy, a familiarity, that made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. One night, we had dinner at the resort's main restaurant, and I was looking forward to it. I had hoped it would be the turning point, a chance to reconnect and talk without distractions. But as soon as we sat down, I knew something was off. Alex was unusually quiet. He seemed more interested in his phone than in the conversation. I could barely get a word in edgewise, and when I did, he would answer distractedly, his eyes scanning the room, as if he was looking for someone. I wanted to scream at him to demand his attention, but I held back. I told myself to be patient. After all, this was supposed to be our time, our celebration. But as I sat there, picking at my food, I felt like I was in the presence of a stranger. Later, when we returned to our villa, things only seemed to get worse. Alex was on his phone again, his brow furrowed as he typed rapidly. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me, but I couldn't help it. I was too aware of the distance between us. That's when I saw it, a number in his recent calls list that I didn't recognize. It wasn't from the resort, and it wasn't from anyone I knew. I picked up his phone, my hands shaking as I stared at the screen. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I tapped the number. And then I saw the text message. It was from Kayla. The message was short, nothing particularly damning, but it was enough to make my heart race. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," it read. That was all. But it was enough. Enough to send me spiraling. I dropped the phone on the bed, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront him right then and there, but the other part of me was terrified of what I would hear if I did. He came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, unaware that I had seen the message. I had to force myself to stay calm as he sat down next to me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to ask him about the message. I wanted to confront him about the strange behavior, the smiles he shared with Kayla, the growing distance between us. But instead, I stayed silent. The words wouldn't come. I didn't know how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. I didn't know how much longer I could live in this lie, in this half-life where nothing felt real anymore. The pain was growing too heavy, and I could feel it consuming me. Something inside me snapped that night. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I needed answers. And soon. The silence in the room was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside me. I sat there staring at Alex as he tried to process the words I had just said. "I need you to leave," I had told him, and the look in his eyes, confusion mixed with desperation, was almost more than I could bear. But it was too late for second chances. Too late for apologies. He had crossed a line that no amount of begging could undo. I didn't want him there anymore. I couldn't bear the thought of sharing a space with him after everything that had unfolded. The man I loved, the man who had promised me forever, had been sharing his love, his attention, and his affection with someone else. And that wasn't something I could just forgive. Not this time. Alex stood frozen by the bed, as though he hadn't processed the weight of my request. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I saw the panic in his eyes, the realization that his world, the life he had known with me, was falling apart. "Please don't do this," he said. His voice a whisper, but I could hear the crack in it, the vulnerability. "We can fix this. We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away." His plea struck me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. I had to be strong. I had to take control of my life again, even if it meant walking away from the man I once believed I would grow old with. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his betrayal still hanging heavy in the air. "You don't get it, Alex. You don't get to tear us apart and then just hope everything will go back to normal because you say so. You had every chance to fix things and you chose her instead." The words came out more bitter than I intended, but I couldn't stop them. They felt like a release, like the anger and hurt I had been holding inside for so long finally found an outlet. "You made your choice. You have to live with that." He flinched, and I could see the guilt washing over him. He stepped toward me, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. The moment our fingers touched, I felt nothing but a cold emptiness. The connection that had once been there had been severed, and there was no turning back. "I'm sorry, I truly am. I don't know how it happened, but it did," Alex said, his voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you." His apology felt hollow, like words meant to buy him time, to buy him forgiveness. But no matter how sorry he was, it didn't change the fact that he had destroyed the trust we had built over years. I could no longer see him as the man I married. I saw only the man who had lied to my face, the man who had chosen someone else over me. And that was something I couldn't forget. "I don't want your apology," I said, the bitterness in my voice sharpening. "I want the man I thought you were back, the man who didn't lie, the man who didn't betray me. But that man doesn't exist anymore. Not for me." The room was filled with the deafening sound of my words hanging in the air between us. I saw Alex's face twist with pain, but it didn't move me. It couldn't. I had spent too many years looking the other way, convincing myself that everything would be okay. But it wasn't, and I was done pretending. "I'm leaving," he said quietly, finally, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "I'll pack my things." I nodded without speaking, feeling a rush of mixed emotions flood through me. Relief, sadness, anger. But mostly, there was this quiet voice inside of me telling me that this was the right choice, even if it didn't feel like it right then. I had always believed that love was enough, that if we worked hard enough, we could make it through anything. But love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. And I realized now that I couldn't sacrifice my own happiness to hold on to something that had already been broken. Alex left the room, and I stood there in the quiet aftermath of his departure. My heart felt as if it had been shattered, but there was something else too, something that was slowly beginning to take root inside me. Strength. I wasn't just a wife, a partner. I was me. And I was starting to realize that I didn't need him to define me. I went to the balcony, my bare feet cold on the tiles. The ocean stretched out before me, the waves crashing against the shore as though they too were mourning the loss of what we once had. I had always found peace in the sound of the waves, but tonight, it felt different. Tonight, I could hear the echoes of everything I had lost, but I could also hear the promise of something new. I sat on the balcony, alone, for what felt like hours. The cool breeze ruffled my hair, and the darkness of the night settled around me like a cloak. I closed my eyes, taking in a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. I was scared, but I was also ready. I was ready to walk away, to start over. When I finally went back inside, the room felt emptier than it ever had before. The bed, once shared with Alex, felt like a hollow space that I no longer recognized. But I wasn't going to cry over the end of a chapter I couldn't rewrite. I had spent far too long trying to change things that were beyond my control, and it had gotten me nowhere. The next morning, I woke up early, my eyes red and swollen from the tears I had shed the night before. The resort was still beautiful, but it felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I knew I had to leave, to get away from the place that had once been a symbol of love and happiness. But before I left, I made one more decision. I had to let go of the guilt, the doubt, the fear that had been weighing me down. I wasn't the one who had failed here. I wasn't the one who had betrayed us. It was Alex. And no matter how hard it was, I had to find a way to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. I packed my things, alone, with the same quiet determination that had carried me through the last few days. I left the resort without a word to Alex. He was still there when I walked out, packing his things quietly, probably trying to avoid confrontation. But I didn't need to see him again. I didn't need to hear any more apologies or promises. I had already made my decision. As I drove away from the resort, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never settle for less than I deserved. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, and learn to trust myself again. I would heal. And most importantly, I would never again let someone else dictate my worth. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was done looking back. The woman I once was had been left behind, but the woman I was becoming had finally found her strength.